Hello everyone and welcome to another Houdini tutorial. Today we are going to be making a swarm of cute little bugs flying around, and to do this we'll be taking a closer look at the copy stamp node, and then we'll also be looking at a couple different things we can do to make our render look nicer. So first things first, let's go ahead and make a project and save it. Alright, first thing we're going to do is model our cute little bug. They're going to be pretty simplistic, so let's just drop down a geo. We'll call this bug. And his body's just going to be a squashed sphere, pretty simple, pretty cute. I think as far as bugs go, the simpler it looks, the more at ease people will be around it. So let's do a polygon mesh, and we'll make it pretty high res, maybe like 100 by 100. And let's just squash him. Like, yeah, let's make this like a 0.5. And we'll just keep that as his body, just like a smushed body. So now let's go ahead and make the wings. We'll just drop down a circle. And we'll put the template flag on his body so we can see that for reference. On our circle, we'll put this on a different plane, the ZX, and we'll make this a polygon with lots of divisions, say 100, and we'll stretch this out. We want it to be pretty wide. All right, now we can taper our wings to make it look like they're coming out from the body. So there's actually a node for this. It's called linear taper. Wire this in. And then we just need to change the capture direction to the x-axis. And then you can adjust the parameters here, make them skinnier, make them wider. Here you can do the capture length. All right, let's do that. These are the parameters that I ended up going with. Just kind of a wing that tapers off. And then we will move it over to the side with a transform. And then we just create another transform. I'm copying it by holding Alt and then left click dragging. And then that makes a direct copy of this transform. And we can just rotate this 180 degrees. So when we merge the two together with the body, we get our little simplistic bug, but we want our bug's wings to flap, so we will just rotate them on the Z-axis. So let's drop down another transform, and I can show you how we do this. So we'll look at this wing. So ideally, we want it to rotate on the Z-axis, up and down, up and down, up and down. If you recall, with our spray painting tutorial, we used the sine function, and we can actually do that with our rotation to make it rotate up and down. So if we type in the expression sin, sine, by the frame, and then this number would be how fast it rotates, how fast it moves up and down. Like, for me, 70 seemed to work fine. And then this number is how high up and down it works. So we'll do times 50. So now it'll rotate up and down, up and down, up and down. And if you want any more explanation on the sine expression, please look at my spray painting tutorial. I will link that in the description down below. So we'll just copy this transform, but we need to rotate this on the opposite direction. Okay, so do you see how it wibble wobbles right here? We need to make this a -70, so then it goes in the right direction. And now we have our bug flapping his wings, pretty simplistic. You can obviously model a bug that looks a little more realistic and scary. Now we'll do a null, and we'll just call this out bug. So we have our bug modeled with the wings. Now we need to make a bunch of particles and copy the bug to the particles. So we'll drop down a geo, and we'll call this swarm. And we need to make points for our bug to copy to. So we'll drop down a sphere, And it doesn't matter what kind of primitive type it is. We're just filling this sphere full of points. Make it pretty big. Depending on how big it is where your bugs are going to spawn. So about right there. And let's drop down a pop net to get some particles in here. Drag it in here. We have a bunch of particles scattered around here. But do you see how the particles are only spawning on the outside? We want them to also be on the inside. So let's fill this sphere full of volume with a ISO offset. So essentially we have our sphere with an ISO offset, it fills it with volume, so then our particles are also on the inside of the sphere. So let's dive inside. We only want our particles to exist and never create more, never lose any. So in the birth tab, we have our constant and our impulse. One is seconds, one is frames if you hover across it. This is second, this is frame. And I only want about 200 bugs. If you want more bugs than that, you can increase this number here. So at frame 1, I want 200 bugs. Well, let's do frames. So 0 at impulse count, I want 200 bugs on the first frame. And then we move forward 1 frame and I want 0 more bugs. I just want 200 and that's it. So when we go along, we have 200 bugs, no more particles are being created. But as you can see, nothing happens. Our particles don't move, and that's because there's no force. We don't have any gravity in our pop net. We need to add that, and you can do this in a numerous amount of ways. I'm just going to do a pop wind, but if you type in pop in the tab, you'll see there's a ton of different things. You could do like a pop curve force, have your bugs follow like a path. You could do pop attract and have like your bugs come to like a thing of honey or something like that. Pop axis force will have them spinning around an object. We'll just stick with a pop wind for this tutorial, but you can feel free to experiment to get your bugs to do whatever you'd like. We'll do a pop wind and wire this in. So now we can just mess around with the parameters here. Right now, our amplitude is set to 0, so our bugs aren't going to move, but if we bump it up to something like 10, our particles are going to start moving, and just picture bugs at each of these particles. I kind of messed around with this earlier, and these are the settings that I ended up with. So amplitude 25, swirl size 20, maybe like lower turbulence. So our bugs just kind of move around pretty slow, but at least they're not seemingly all following the same kind of force. They all seem to have a mind of their own. So let's hop up one. We have our pop net. Now we need to copy our bug onto it. So I'll take off the display flag on our geometry, hop inside. Let's bring in our bug model with an object merge. Let's find him, out bug. Okay, so here we could normally do a typical like copy to points, and that would be fine. Copy to points, and we'll wire this guy in, geometry to copy, target points to copy to, and each one of these points would get a bug, and the problem with this is they all look the same. There's no variation with it, and that's where our friend the copy stamp can come into play. So if we delete this and try a copy stamp, pretty similar setup to the copy to points, parameters to copy, template to copy. And first thing you want to do here is stamp the inputs, and then you also want to pack the geometry. And packing it makes each of these objects just 1 point. Let me show you what I mean. So when we hit the display on the object merge, it's just our 1 bug, and we hit the point numbers, you'll see that it has tons of different point numbers because we made lots of different edges which meet together and make lots of different points. And so when we copy them here without packing them, each one of these bugs gets a point, and that can really bog down your computer. So when we hit pack geometry before copying, each one of these only gets 1 point, which is going to help us a lot, and it'll smooth out your computer. Even with 200 bugs, it's going fine. They're all flying around, no problem. So now we can do a couple different variables. Our first variable, let's adjust the size. So our bugs will be lots of different kinds of sizes. Now in the value, we'll say we want a random value on our point number, so $PT. and we'll times this by 2. So this is saying like we could have bugs half the size, we could have bugs double the size, and it's just like a random value between the two. But we need to plug this variable in a parameter. So let's do a transform. We can take off the point number. And when we click on the transform, you'll see this parameter right here, the uniform scale. So this is what we want to affect. So we're saying, hey, we want a stamp, and then we'll do a string to reference our variable. Forward slash colon dot forward. This is just a typical normal setup to a string. And it says, okay, what node? We want our copy 1. You can see it's adjusted it right here for us. And copy 1 is the name of our copy stamp. Close that off. And we want to reference the size. That's what we named our variable right here. Size. And here we just need to put in a value of some kind. We'll just do 0.5 to avoid any errors of any kind. Close that off. And so when we click on our copy, we have a ton of different bugs, tons of different sizes. That's cool. We can also do this variable for other things such as color. So if we do a color node, granted, you can do this with the color node on its own, but I just kind of wanted to show you different uses for this copy stamp. So we'll just do the size and the color. You could also say drop down a mountain node to add like a different texture to the bug's bodies and wings, and then you could have like a different mountain seed if you want. Like the possibilities are numerous, but I'll just show you the color for now. So we could do like our color is random, and then we could technically, if you want to just bypass the copy stamp as far as the color goes, you could highlight this and do a random point. See, since each bug has its own point, we could do it that way, but we'll just for the sake of explaining things, we'll just do it this way. So we'll do it constant, and you can see that our color has 3 different numbers. If you remember from my previous tutorials, this is known as a set. A set has 3 different values. So we're having to do 3 different variables. Our first value of our set is red, then green, then blue. And pretty similar setup to the value here. We want like a random, PT. You could also do tons of different numbers here. Let's say like times 50, a random number between that and 50. The one thing you want to do with a set is you want each one of these to be a different value. Otherwise, our bugs will just have like varying shades of black and white, like just different grays. So type in like just a bunch of different crazy stuff. You can experiment, like divide it by 35 even, or let's say like random $PT times 20. And then you just want to reference each one of these variables in the color. So we'll hit the display flag on that. Color here, we can do stamp. Well, let's just copy and paste this. It'll be quicker. And paste that. And instead of size, we want to reference the red. And so it's different shades of our red. And then we highlight that, and then we can type in green. We highlight this, and it could be blue. So now we have all these different colors of bugs. And that's basically how the copy stamp works. Like I mentioned earlier, there's like a ton of different options. You can play around with this to get like get like lots of different variations to your swarms. I mean, the possibilities are endless. It's awesome. So you can see that we have a ton of different sizes of bugs. For me personally, I think I want my body and my wings to be different. I want the bodies to be different colors, but I want the wings to all be like a translucent color, but I want them all to be constant. So we can do that by splitting up the wings and the body here before we add our color nodes. So let's look at our bug here. If we just select the wings, type in group, and I want this to be wings. We can delete that. So we have our wings, but then we could also say delete selected. Then we have our body. We actually want this transform to be before the wings. And now we just want our color to be attaching to our body. So we have all our different bodies because our wings are separated here. So let's just add a basic white color to this. Actually, let's make it like a blue. You can make your wings whatever color you want. Then we can merge these together. Make that a primitive. Okay. Make sure that you change your class to primitive on both of these colors if you want to do this setup. If you're happy with your wings all looking different colors, that is also fine. It's just up to your personal preference. So we have our typical setup. We have our bugs flying around. Here you may want to drop down a file cache if your computer's currently getting bogged down. It can't hurt just to cache it up. Let's just call this swarm. Doesn't hurt to save it. Okay, once you're happy with your simulation, we can go ahead and do the fun part, which is rendering it. We have a cache, make sure to load from disk. Let's hop up one and let's just do a background, like a backdrop. This is like a typical setting that you would do to get good lighting. We'll just drop down a geo. We'll call this background and create a grid. Make it pretty big. And if I want my camera to be here, it doesn't matter if it's down past there. Let's actually make this a lot wider. Add lots of rows because we're going to be bending it. Well, it doesn't need to be that wide. Something similar to that is pretty typical. Now let's do a bend, and we're just going to curl this grid into a 90-degree. So when we hit bend here, you can see that our capture length isn't very long. We can adjust that right here. Okay, this is like a typical backdrop for something. We can actually move this a little bit closer. Transform. Something similar to this. Then you can make it wider if you want later. It's just, yeah, something like that, where it just curls around the bottom. This will give you a nice, good lighting situation. Something like that. Okay, so that would be the background. Now let's drop down like an environment light. Here you can plug in an environment map. I already have like a starlight one I think might be pretty good. Let's do like just a simple point light in the middle. And we'll increase the exposure, something like 5 or 6. Want it pretty bright. Okay, now we can set up the camera. So you can set up a camera now. Let's see, let's move it back just a hair. I still want it to be in the swarm, if you know what I mean. And then with your camera, something we've never done before is in the sampling, you can adjust the focus distance. So let's press the Z key, and you'll see this is the focus distance right here. And you see these arrows right here? This is what's within focus. So we want our bugs closer to us to be in focus, and then in the back they kind of blur out. And you can adjust this here. This will give you a nice like depth of field. Yeah, something like that. Let's look at our camera, we got our bugs. And if you want this focus distance to really come into effect, go in the out. Oh, looks like my mantra was deleted. Okay, in the mantra, go to rendering and enable the depth of field. This will help a lot. So now we can go ahead and apply materials to this. Let's go to our material palette. We'll make one for our bugs and one for our background. I just want my background to be like a very plain color, not really reflective. So have this at 1 and 0. Just really dark, I'm thinking, like a dark blue. And our bugs, we can just drag and drop that. I want my bugs to already pretty much inherit their color that they already have. So I'll just do white and make sure to click on use point color and use packed color. I want them, I think it'd be cool for them to be metallic, like pretty shiny and reflective. And I even want a little bit of transparency because I want their wings to seem just a little bit see-through. You can do, let's try like 0.1, see what that looks like. Oh, it looks like it already went away. Let's hit save, check out the rendered view. Okay, that actually looks pretty good. Ooh, this one kind of looks like a golden snitch. Maybe even like a little bit more transparency. 0.2. And then we can adjust the opacity. Slightly opaque. There we go. Yeah, I think I like that. It looks like the wings are just a little bit see-through. All right, so we have our background, we have our color. Once you're happy with all that, let's hop into the out. And there's a couple things you can change here. Normally I do like a physically based rendering. You can allow motion blur, so when they're flapping their wings, there's a little bit of motion blur to it. You can add, so in the geometry of our swarm, go to render and our sampling, and you can add velocity blur. You can add acceleration blur. Just kind of play around with it. All right, and in our out, there's a couple different things you can mess around with here. In the rendering tab, you'll probably want to kick up the pixel samples. One thing that I did want to show you now is the limits tab. And the limits tab has a couple different settings you can do here. If you hover over them, you can see just what they do. You have the diffuse limit, the volume limit. I'm gonna bump up the diffuse for diffuse rays, make it look just a little bit better. Maybe something like 3. The SSS limit, number of times subsurface scattering rays. We don't really have too much transparency here, just the wings, but that's not anything. That's not anything we really have to worry about. Let's see, volume limit, the number of times a volumetric ray can propagate through a scene. We'll just keep the diffuser limit. I might actually bump this up to 5. And then, yeah, sampling, let's see, maybe even like a 9x9. Here you can up things like the quality, the reflection quality. I made mine, like my bugs, metallic and reflective, so I might be interested in bumping up that. But to get the overall better quality, you can just adjust these pixel samples if you have the time to render it. If you are using Mantra, no matter what, your renders are going to take longer anyway. So obviously you're probably just learning anyway. And if you don't want to mess with these settings, you can just do the pixel samples, no big deal. You can also add like a texture to your background if you want to make it look a little more interesting. Change color, like the possibilities are endless. Kind of a simple tutorial for today. I really just wanted to show you guys how you can play around with the copy stamp tool. And then just a couple things that you could start thinking about, like your camera. There's different settings here, like your focus distance, your f-stop. There's a lot of different things to mess around with. Maybe even like bump up the resolution, 1920 by 1080. There's a lot of stuff you can do. So yeah, pretty simple. I appreciate you guys watching. Let me know if you have any questions. Do you have a better way of going about this? I'd love to hear from you. What are some other ideas that you might have for the copy stamp tool to add a little variation between each of your points? I just love hearing you guys feedback. I love it when you guys discover my channel and you say that you found some of my tutorials helpful. Like that is also uplifting to hear. So I love hearing from you guys. Please continue it. Otherwise, I will continue to make more tutorials for you. So tune in next time. That should be all for now. Thanks for watching. Bye.